This is a story from the backwoods of America. My granddaddy told me this when I was just a boy. He had big, calloused hands from a lifetime of working with axes and rope. And when he spoke, the words came out slow, like each one weighed as much as an oak log. I remember sitting at his feet close to the fireplace, watching the wood crackle and throw sparks that danced in the dark air. He looked at the fire, not at me, and he started to tell. When he was a child, about 8 years old, he lived with his parents in a log cabin deep in the woods, so far from any other living soul that the silence at night seemed to have weight. The cabin was small, with 2 foggy glass windows and a wooden roof that groaned when the wind blew hard. His room was in the back, and the only window looked straight out at a dense thicket of elderberry that grew wild and twisted, forming a dark green wall that blocked the view of the deeper forest. My granddaddy told me that back then he was not afraid of anything. He was a curious boy, the kind who would poke at ant hills just to see what would happen, who would follow deer tracks until he lost track of time. But then something changed. It was on an autumn night when the air was starting to get cold and the leaves were falling like silent rain. He was lying in bed, looking at the dark wooden ceiling, when he felt something. It was not a sound. It was not a smell. It was that feeling you get when you know someone is looking at you, even without seeing anyone. He turned his head slowly toward the window, and that is when he saw them. 2 yellow eyes shining in the darkness of the elderberry thicket. They were not normal eyes. They did not blink. They did not move from side to side. They just stayed there, fixed, like 2 cold embers burning in the middle of the night. My granddaddy froze, with his heart pounding so hard he could hear his own blood pulsing in his ears. He stared back for what felt like hours, but it was probably just a few minutes. Then he pulled the blanket over his head and stayed there, curled up until sleep came. The next morning, he woke with sunlight coming through the window and thought it had been a nightmare. But something inside him knew it was not. He jumped out of bed, went to the window and looked at the thicket. Everything looked normal. Twisted branches, dark purple elderberry leaves, some ripe berries hanging like small poisonous jewels. Nothing strange, nothing out of place, but he knew. He knew something had been there. He told his mother at breakfast. She was frying eggs in an iron pan, and when he spoke about the yellow eyes, she just smiled and ran her hand through his hair with affection. She said it was just imagination, that children always see strange things in the dark. His father, who was sharpening a machete near the door, did not even lift his head. He just muttered something about boys and ghost stories. Nobody believed him. But that night, when it got dark and he lay down in bed again, the eyes came back. Same position, same height, same yellow glow that seemed to cut through the darkness like it was made of liquid gold. My granddaddy told me that this time he did not hide under the blanket. He stared back, trying to make out some shape, some body behind those eyes, but he could not see anything. It was as if the eyes were floating alone in the middle of the thicket, and then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The forest was in absolute silence. Normally, at night, the sounds were constant. Crickets singing, owls hooting in the distance, the rustling of small animals running through the dry leaves. But that night, when the eyes were there was no sound at all. Not a single cricket, not the wind. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. He closed his eyes tight and tried to sleep. But every time he opened them, even just a crack, the yellow eyes were still there, watching, waiting. On the 3rd night, it happened again. And on the 5th, and on the 7th, always every other night. Like a pattern, as if something was following a calendar that only it knew. My granddaddy started losing sleep. He would stay awake, waiting, with his heart tight in his chest, looking at that window as if it were a door to another world. His mother started noticing the dark circles under his eyes, the way he pushed food around on his plate without eating. She asked if he was sick. He said no, but he was. He was sick with fear, and the worst part was that nobody else could see them. His father went to the thicket one morning, with his rifle on his shoulder, and kicked through the bushes with his boot. He found nothing, no tracks, no fur, No animal droppings. Nothing that indicated that something big enough to have eyes that size was living there. "It is just your head, boy," his father said, clapping him hard on the shoulder. There is nothing there, but my granddaddy knew there was, because every night the eyes appeared, he felt it. He felt the weight of that gaze, as if something very old, very patient was studying his every move. And the forest knew it too. The animals knew. That is why they stayed silent. The weeks went by and the yellow eyes kept appearing, every other night, without fail. My granddaddy started marking the days on a piece of wood under his bed, scratching with the tip of a rusty nail. He needed to understand. He needed to know if there was a pattern, a reason, something that made sense in all of this. But there was no logic. There was no explanation, just the eyes, always in the same place, always at the same time, always in silence. He tried lighting a candle near the window one night, thinking the light would scare away whatever it was. But the eyes stayed there, unmoved, as if the light made no difference at all. He tried throwing a rock into the thicket during the day. The rock disappeared between the branches and made no sound when it fell. He even tried praying like his mother had taught him. But the words felt hollow, empty, and the eyes came back anyway. That is when he made a decision. If nobody believed him, if nobody was going to do anything, then he would find out what was there himself. He would prove to everyone that he was not making up stories. He would capture whatever that thing was. He started planning. He knew the wolf appeared every other night. That meant he would have only one full day to do everything. The day when he knew the eyes would not come at night. One day to dig, one day to prepare the trap, one single chance. The next morning, as soon as his father left to cut down trees and his mother started tending the garden, my granddaddy grabbed an old shovel he found in the shed and went straight to the elderberry thicket. He studied the ground quickly. He measured his steps. He observed where the dirt was softer, where the branches were most fragile. And then he started digging. He dug without stopping all day long. His hands became covered with blisters that burst and bled. But he did not stop. His arms hurt, his back hurt, but he kept going. He dug until the hole was deep enough that if something fell in, it could not get out on its own. He worked with an urgency that only a child determined to prove he is not crazy can have. Then he covered the hole with thin elderberry branches, dry leaves, and a little dirt on top. He made sure to leave everything looking natural, as if nothing had been touched. When he finished, he stepped back and admired his work. It looked perfect. It looked invisible. Now he just had to wait. That night he could barely eat dinner. His mother asked if he had a fever, put her hand on his forehead and frowned. But he said he was fine, just tired. He went to his room earlier than usual, lay down in bed, and stared at the window with his heart racing. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds. The night was darker than normal, perfect for his plan. And then, as always, the eyes appeared, yellow, bright, fixed. My granddaddy held his breath. He stayed completely still, just watching. The eyes stayed there for a while, like they always did, and then something different happened. They moved. Not much. Just a slight shift to the side, as if the creature was adjusting its position. My granddaddy felt his heart jump in his chest. It was working. The trap was attracting whatever that thing was. The eyes moved again, this time more to the right, and then forward. My granddaddy got up slowly from the bed, making no noise, and went to the window. He pressed his face against the cold, foggy glass, trying to see more, trying to make out the shape of the creature. But the darkness was too thick. He could only see the eyes getting closer and closer to the edge of the thicket. And then he heard it, a sound, low, deep, like a muffled growl coming from somewhere deep. It was not threatening, it was cautious, as if the creature was testing the ground, feeling the earth with its paws before taking the next step. My granddaddy held his breath. The eyes moved forward a little more, and then it happened. The sound of branches breaking, a dull thud, a short muffled yelp. Something had fallen into the trap. My granddaddy did not think twice. He grabbed the oil lantern that sat beside his bed, lit it with trembling hands, and ran out of the room. He crossed the living area, passed through the kitchen, opened the front door with so much force it slammed against the wall. The cold night air hit his face like a slap, but he did not care. He ran toward the thicket with the lantern swinging in his hand, casting long, dancing shadows on the ground. "I got it!" he shouted to himself. "I got it!" But he was running too fast. He was too excited. He was not paying attention. And then suddenly the ground disappeared under his feet. He fell. He fell straight into his own trap. The impact knocked all the air out of his lungs. The lantern flew from his hand and went out when it hit the ground. He lay there, sprawled at the bottom of the hole, with pain in his back, with dirt getting in his mouth, trying to understand what had happened. It took a few seconds for his brain to process. He had fallen into the trap he made himself, and then he heard something that made every muscle in his body lock up. Growl, deep, profound, coming from above. My granddaddy slowly lifted his head and looked up. And that is when he saw them. Two yellow eyes, enormous, glowing in the dark, looking directly at him. They were not in the thicket. They were right above him. At the edge of the hole, the creature had come out of the thicket. It was there, real, solid, alive. My granddaddy could not see the whole body, only the outline of something large, something furry, something that was breathing deep and slow. The eyes lowered as if the creature was lowering. Its head to smell him, he was trapped, alone, defenseless, and then he heard another sound, a much worse sound, coming from the forest behind the thicket. Heavy, dragging, branches breaking, leaves being crushed, footsteps, big footsteps. My granddaddy told me that in that moment he understood what real fear was. It was not the fear of seeing eyes in the window. It was not the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of being completely helpless, trapped at the bottom of a dark hole. While something big and hungry approached, the footsteps got louder, closer, and then he saw it, a massive shape emerging from the darkness of the forest, bigger than anything he had ever seen. A bear, huge, dark, patchy fur, muscles moving under the skin like thick ropes. Its head swayed from side to side, its snout sniffing the air. And then the bear's eyes found my granddaddy's eyes, and the bear moved forward. My granddaddy tried to move, tried to climb the walls of the hole, but the dirt was too loose, too slippery. Every time he tried to climb up, the wall crumbled, and he fell back down. His fingers clawed at the earth, his nails broke, and he felt panic rising up his throat like bile. The bear reached the edge of the hole. It stopped. It looked down, and my granddaddy could see everything now. The yellowed fangs, the saliva dripping from the corner of its mouth, the small hungry eyes that had no mercy. No doubt, the bear growled, low, guttural, and then it started to descend into the hole. My granddaddy curled up in the corner, pressing his back against the dirt wall, trying to make himself smaller, trying to disappear. But there was nowhere to go. The hole was small. The bear was big, and he was just an 8-year-old child. The bear was already getting its front paws inside the hole, dirt falling around it. When something happened, a sound tore through the air, a howl. It was not like the howls my granddaddy had heard before. It was louder, more fierce, more angry. It came from above, from somewhere near the thicket. The bear stopped. It turned its head, and then something black as the night itself leapt over the hole and landed on the bear's back. It was a wolf. No, it was the wolf, the yellow eyes my granddaddy saw. Everything from inside the hole. He saw the wolf, huge, lean, with black fur that seemed to absorb the light, sink its teeth into the bear's neck. He saw the bear roar and thrash, trying to shake off the attacker. He saw the two creatures roll away from the hole in a confusion of fur, claws, and snarls. The fight was brutal. The bear rose up on its hind legs and tried to crush the wolf with its front paws. But the wolf was quick, dodging, biting, and pulling back. The sound of the snarls echoed through the forest, breaking the silence that had lasted for weeks. Blood started staining the ground. There was no way to tell whose it was. My granddaddy stayed there, at the bottom of the hole, watching everything with wide eyes. He wanted to scream, wanted to call his parents, but his voice would not come out. He was stuck there, witnessing something that should not exist, something that defied everything he thought he knew about the world. The wolf was smaller than the bear, but it fought as if it were made of pure fury. Every bite was precise, every movement calculated. It was not fighting for food. It was not fighting for territory. It was fighting for him, for the boy in the hole. The bear tried to flee, to turn its back and return to the forest, but the wolf would not let it. It jumped in front, blocking the way, growling with such intensity that the air itself seemed to vibrate. The bear charged again, this time with its claws extended, and struck the wolf's flank. My granddaddy saw the wolf stagger, saw the dark blood run down the black fur, but the wolf did not fall. It rose again and attacked. The fight continued, minutes that felt like hours. The sky began to lighten on the horizon, a pale gray announcing the dawn. And it was in that moment, when the first light of day touched the earth, that the bear finally gave up. It gave one last roar, weak, defeated, and it fell. The huge body hit the ground with a dull thud, raising dust. It stayed there, motionless, with its eyes still open but lifeless. The wolf stood beside the body, panting, with blood dripping from several wounds. The black fur was torn in some places, showing the raw flesh underneath, but it was alive, and then the wolf turned its head and looked directly at the bottom of the hole, at my granddaddy, the yellow eyes. The same ones that had watched through the window for weeks. No, they were there within reach, real, undeniable. My granddaddy did not move, did not blink, just looked back, and in that moment, he understood. It was not a predator that had been watching him every night. It never was. It was a guardian, something that knew danger was coming, something that stayed there night after night, making sure nothing bad came near that cabin. Near that boy, the wolf held his gaze for a few more seconds, and then slowly it turned and began to limp toward the forest. Wait, my granddaddy finally managed to shout. His voice came out hoarse, desperate. Wait, please. But the wolf did not stop. It kept walking, stumbling, leaving a trail of blood on the ground. And then it disappeared between the trees, swallowed by the darkness that was beginning to recede with the arrival of day. My granddaddy stayed there, alone in the hole, with the dead bear's body a few yards away, trying to process what had just happened. It was his father who found him. He heard the screaming, grabbed the rifle and ran outside. When he saw his son at the bottom of the hole and the dead bear beside it, he was speechless. He helped the boy out, checked if he was hurt, and then stood staring at the bear with an expression my granddaddy had never seen before. It was fear, pure fear. What happened here? His father asked, his voice low. My granddaddy told him everything. The yellow eyes, the trap, the fall, the bear, and the wolf. This time, nobody said it was imagination because the proof was there. An adult bear, dead, with deep fang marks on its neck and chest. Marks that could only have been made by another predator. And when his father followed the blood trail leading into the forest, he found tufts of black fur caught in the bushes. Wolf fur. In the following days, the family stayed alert. His father reinforced the doors and windows, put in new locks, kept the rifle always loaded. But nothing happened. No other bear appeared. No strange sounds at night. The forest returned to normal. The crickets sang. The owls hooted. Life went on, but the yellow eyes never came back. My granddaddy waited. Night after night, lying in bed, looking at the window, waiting to see that familiar glow in the elderberry thicket. But he saw nothing. Just darkness, just silence. He searched the forest. He followed tracks. He called out. He left pieces of meat near the thicket. But the wolf never appeared. It was as if it had fulfilled its purpose and moved on. The years passed. My granddaddy grew up. He became a man. He built his own cabin. He had children. And then, on a birthday night, the same day he had fallen into the trap and been saved by the wolf, something happened. He was sitting near the window, smoking a pipe, looking at the forest that surrounded his property. And then he saw them, 2 yellow dots shining between the trees. His heart jumped. He stood up slowly, went to the window and just stood there, just looking. The eyes stayed there for a few minutes. They did not move. They did not blink. They just watched. And then my granddaddy did something he had never done before. He raised his hand and waved slowly as if he were greeting an old friend. The eyes blinked once, and then they disappeared. From that day on, every birthday of his, without fail, the yellow eyes would appear, always at the same time, always for a few minutes. And my granddaddy would always go to the window and wave. He had no fear. He had no doubt. He knew exactly what it was. It was gratitude, it was respect, it was the recognition that there are things in this forest that we do not need to fully understand to know that they are important, that they are protective, that they are there in the shadows watching even when we do not ask, even when we do not believe. My granddaddy did this until the last birthday of his life. Even when he got old and sick, even when he could barely get out of bed, he would ask to be taken to the window on that specific night. And there he would stay, waiting. And the eyes always appeared, and he always waved. When he died, it was on a summer night with the window open and the sound of crickets coming into the room. I was not there, but my grandmother told me that just before he closed his eyes for the last time, he looked at the window and smiled, as if he had seen something. As if someone had come to say goodbye. She did not see anything, but I believe he did. I believe the yellow eyes were there. Sometimes, when I'm here in my cabin, alone, with night falling and the forest getting dark around me, I think about this story. I think about my granddaddy, still a boy, fallen in that hole, seeing something impossible fight for him. I think about the black wolf with yellow eyes that watched, that protected, that sacrificed its own safety for a child that was not even of the same species. And I wonder how many other creatures are out there, in the shadows, doing the same thing. How many times do we walk through the forest and feel like we are being watched, and we assume it is something dangerous, something that wants to hurt us? How many times is what is watching us the exact opposite? Something that is making sure we get home safely? The forest is not just teeth and claws. It is not just danger and death. Sometimes the forest cares, sometimes the forest protects, and we never know. Because these things do not want recognition. They do not want thanks. They just do what needs to be done. Like that wolf did for my granddaddy. I have never seen the yellow eyes. I never had my own forest guardian. But every time I go out at night and feel that sensation of being watched, I do not close the curtain. I do not lock the door harder. I just keep walking, because if there is something watching me out there in the shadows, between the trees, maybe it is not there to hurt me. Maybe it is there to make sure nothing else will. And if that is the case, then I am grateful. Even without seeing, even without knowing, I am grateful. If this story moved something in you, if it made you think twice about what watches from the shadows, then do an old man a kindness. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a thumbs up. Share this tale with someone who needs to hear it. There are more stories waiting in these woods. Stories that need telling. Stories that the forest whispers when the world gets quiet. And I will be right here by this fire, waiting to tell them to you. Until next time, keep your eyes on the tree line. This was a story from the backwoods of America. Thank you for listening.